When you see blood, your body does the most useless thing imaginable. It doesn't run, it doesn't fight, it shuts you down and drops you on the floor, defenseless. It looks like a total malfunction. But this strange reaction may be one of the reasons your ancestors survived at all. So why does the human body faint at the exact moment it should act? At first, the answer seems obvious. Blood is upsetting. Seeing it is scary. You get frightened, you get overwhelmed, and you pass out. Case closed. Fainting is just fear taken too far, the body's panic button jammed all the way down. But that picture is too simple, because fear usually does the opposite. When you are truly afraid, your body floods with adrenaline, your heart races, your blood pressure climbs, your muscles tense, ready to run or fight. That is the fear response, and it is built to keep you upright and moving, not to drop you on the ground. So if blood only triggered fear, you would feel a jolt of energy, not a slow slide into darkness. And yet, for a lot of people, the opposite happens. The room tilts, a cold sweat spreads, the edges of vision go gray, and then nothing. That is not the body speeding up. That is the body crashing. So something stranger is going on than simple fear. To understand it, we have to look at what is actually happening inside you in those few seconds. The reaction has a name. Doctors call it vasovagal syncope. Syncope just means fainting. Vasovagal points to the culprit, the vagus nerve, one of the longest and most important nerves in your body, running from your brain down to your heart and gut. Normally, your heart rate and blood pressure are balanced by two opposing systems. One speeds things up, the other slows things down. When you see blood in some people, something odd happens. There may be a quick spike of stress first, heart up, pressure up. And then, suddenly, the system overcorrects. The vagus nerve fires hard. Your heart slows down, your blood vessels relax and widen, and your blood pressure doesn't just dip, it falls off a cliff. Here is the problem with that. Your brain sits at the top of your body, and it needs a constant pressurized supply of blood to stay conscious. When blood pressure crashes, that supply drops. The brain, starved for a moment, does the only sensible thing it can. It powers down the expensive parts and pulls you to the ground. Fainting, in other words, is not random. It is your brain forcing you horizontal, because lying flat is the fastest way to get blood back to your head. Gravity stops fighting you, and the blood that drained away can return, so the faint itself is a kind of emergency fix. But that only deepens the real mystery. Why would the body crash its own blood pressure in the first place? Why build a switch that knocks you out at the sight of blood, the exact moment you might think you most need to act? This is where the story gets strange, because the leading idea suggests this reaction is not a flaw at all. It may be a leftover survival tactic, an ancient piece of programming from a much more dangerous world. Think about what the sight of blood usually meant for most of human history. It meant violence, an attack, a predator, another human with a weapon. And here is the uncomfortable logic. In a moment of brutal conflict, sometimes the safest thing a body could do was to stop moving entirely. Many animals do a version of this. They freeze, they go limp, they play dead. A creature that lies motionless can look like it is already finished, and a threat that thinks you're already dead may simply move on. By this idea, fainting was a last resort version of playing dead. If you couldn't run and couldn't win, collapsing might make an attacker lose interest. There is a second possible advantage, and it is even more direct. When you faint from this reflex, your heart rate slows and your blood pressure drops. Now imagine you are bleeding from a wound. Lower blood pressure means blood leaves the body more slowly. A crash in pressure could, in theory, help slow the bleeding long enough for the wound to begin to clot. A body that quietly powers down might lose less blood than one thrashing in panic. So fainting may have done two things at once: made you look lifeless to a threat, and helped keep your own blood inside your body. Seen that way, the people who fainted were not the weak ones. They may have been among the survivors. The trait that looks like a malfunction today might be here precisely because, long ago, it worked. But the story is not that clean, because this neat survival explanation runs into a strange wall. If fainting evolved to protect you from your own injuries, why do so many people faint at the sight of someone else's blood, or a needle that hasn't even touched them yet? Or, for some, just hearing a vivid description of an injury, with no blood in sight at all? That is much harder to explain. Playing dead makes sense when you are the one under attack. Slowing your own bleeding makes sense when you are the one who is cut. Neither explains why a person collapses watching a stranger get a flu shot. Some scientists suspect it involves disgust as much as fear, that the body lumps blood and injury into a category of things to recoil from, and the wires between fear, disgust, and the vagus nerve get crossed. Others think it ties into deep social instincts, that seeing harm to another body triggers some of the same machinery as harm to your own. And the honest answer is that we still do not fully know. The collapse is real, the reflex is real. But exactly why it fires for other people's blood is still an open question. What we do know is how personal it is. This reflex isn't evenly spread. Some people go their whole lives without it. Others drop at the first glint of a needle. Roughly 1 in 7 people will faint at the sight of blood at some point, and for a smaller group it becomes a real phobia, strong enough to make them avoid doctors, tests, even care they need. And here is the strange part. It is not really a sign that something is broken. The fainting reflex is built into all of us. It is a switch every human carries. In most people it simply sits quiet, waiting for a trigger that never comes. So picture what is really happening in that one fragile second. Some old part of your nervous system looks at a wound, decides the situation is dangerous in an ancient kind of way, and makes a snap decision that your thinking mind never agreed to. It slows your heart, it drops your pressure, it lays you down. It is trying, in its clumsy, outdated way, to protect you, using rules written for a world of claws and blades, not clinics and paper cuts. And maybe that is the strangest thing about fainting at the sight of blood. It feels like your body failing you, but it may be your body remembering something, running a survival program so old that the danger it was built for barely exists anymore. The threat has changed. The reflex has not. So why do we faint at the sight of blood? Not because we are weak, not because fear simply got the better of us, but because somewhere deep in the body is an ancient switch, built for a more violent world, that still believes the smartest thing to do in the face of blood is to go still, go down, and disappear. You carry that switch right now. Most of the time it sleeps, but it is a small, strange piece of an older human, folded quietly into your nervous system, waiting, just in case the world ever becomes as dangerous as the one it was made for.